What's up, Fuggers? Today we're going to be looking at a bunch of cards that have been revealed for the new expansion. Now, they dumped a bunch of neutral cards, and there's a lot to get through, so I'm going to try to get through these quickly. But before we get into that, if you want to be a Fugger, subscribe to my channel down below, and while you're down there, drop a like and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all my new content, which I release every week. It's absolutely free and painless to subscribe, and you can always unsubscribe later, so please, every single subscription counts. Anyway, let's get into some reviews.
What's up, Fuggers?
Alright guys, first up here we have Tony, King of Piracy. Now this is a 5-mana 4/6 legendary pirate that says both players' decks are swapped. Now important to note, that is an aura effect, that's not a battle cry, that goes away when he dies. It was also confirmed on Twitter that having multiple of these won't swap the decks multiple times. Your deck is either swapped or it's not swapped. The card also has Finale, draw a card. So if you play this with 5 mana left, you draw a card from your opponent's deck immediately. Now this card is a lot stronger than Togwaggle for most applications that Togwaggle is used for, and there's a lot of new applications for this card as well. One thing that came to mind immediately for me was Plot Twist in Warlock. With this, you can shuffle a bunch of really bad cards into your opponent's deck, and you can take cards out of their deck, and then when he gets removed, your opponent gets their deck back, full of all of your garbage. That seems like a pretty fun deck to play to me, and I saw a bunch of other ideas on Twitter, like using Fires of Zinajari or Explore Ungoro to delete your opponent's deck in Warrior, and using Steam Cleaner to delete all of those cards that you generated into their deck. You can also obviously take advantage of this card with cheap draw like Solarium and Warlock, so you can draw a bunch of cards out of your opponent's deck, and you don't even have to worry about the drawback on cards like Solarium. Overall, I think this card is going to be really fun to play with, but it's also going to be pretty frustrating for a lot of opponents, and it might lead to enough unfun moments that it gets nerfed. Alright, next up here we have Metrognome, a 3-mana 2/4 mech that says after you play a 1-cost card, draw a 2-cost card, then increase. So this card is a really cool draw engine if you're able to make it work, and I'm not actually sure how that looks right now. I'd have to do a lot more looking into this, but I'm sure someone will be able to figure out a deck that takes advantage of this guy's effect. I mean, it's insane. So, in theory, it should be able to make a really good deck. I just have no idea what it would be. Alright, next up here we have Audio Amplifier, a 2-mana 2/3 mech that says Battle Cry, set your maximum mana and hand size to 11. Now this card is interesting. I don't know how actually good it's going to be, because you do have to play a 2-mana 2/3 to get this effect, and you have to draw it. Now I don't know how actually useful this card is going to be, because decks that want a hand size increase typically don't want to be playing cards that are this low impact. A 2-mana 2/3 is doing nothing to the board, and in an aggro deck, you don't need the hand size increase, so it's just tough to see where this fits in. If there's some sort of combo deck that needs 11 mana, it might see play there, but it just seems so slow for modern Hearthstone when most combos that work are killing your opponent before turn 10. Alright, next up here we have Annoying Fan, a 1-mana 1/2 mech that says Battle Cry, choose a minion. It can't attack while this is alive. Now this card is really interesting. If you can give it immune, say with the Jailer, then you can theoretically shut down your opponent's minion completely. Now obviously that's not really a viable strategy, or at least not as far as I can see. It seems more like a meme, but this card definitely has some interesting implications. Alright, next up here we have a really good card. 1 mana, 2/1 mech, Frequency Oscillator. Battle Cry, the next mech you play costs 1 less. That is insane. For mech decks that are trying to dump as much stats to board as possible, this is going to be really valuable because it's going to be able to cheat out more mechs onto the board faster so you can do more damage to your opponent quicker. Next up here we have Pozzik Audio Engineer, one of the 3 legendaries that were revealed. He's a 4 mana 5/4 that says Battle Cry, add 2 3/3 bots to your opponent's hand. Death Rattle, summon them for yourself. So what this guy does is he gives you some really incredible tempo if your opponent's not able to play those. And those are 3 mana 3/3s, so they do have to spend 6 mana to get them out of their hand. And they're going to be taking up hand space too, so you can use them like Mukla to try to overdraw them. And then when he dies, he'll summon them for you if they haven't played them already. Now, obviously, your opponent's trying to prioritize playing them most of the time because they know this is coming, but that means your opponent's not going to be able to do whatever they want to do, and instead they're playing these bots. So it's going to slow down your opponent no matter what, and it might overwhelm them with the stats, so I think this guy has a serious chance of seeing competitive play. Alright, next up here we have Festival Security. Now this card looks pretty strong as an anti-aggro tool, especially in a 4-set meta. This guy is going to be pretty strong in that sort of environment, as we've seen cards like Tar Creeper and similar cards be. I believe the 1/5 Naga, that was also pretty strong. Sunken City was a 5-card meta, or 5 expansion meta, but still. But this card is a 3 mana 2/5 with Taunt, and it has Finale, force all enemy minions to attack this. Now, we've discussed what Finale means, so you know how that works. So that's going to be able to take out a whole board of minions against token swarm decks, and it can take out a few minions against other aggro decks. It's pretty strong, pretty versatile, and you can just play it as a 2/5 taunt. So I think this is going to be really good. Next up here we have Merch Seller, a 4 mana 3/5 Naga that says, at the end of your turn, put a random spell on the top of your opponent's deck. Now, I don't think this card's very good. This seems like more of a filler card to me, but maybe I'm not seeing it. It does disrupt your opponent's draw, but it could potentially give them something way better than they were going to draw anyway. It kind of has that drawback that a lot of random cards like this do. Maybe there's a world where you can just deny them whatever they're trying to do, or you shuffle like a Polkelt or Order in the Court so that they don't draw what they're trying to draw, but other than that, I don't think this is very good. Next up here we have Paparazzi, and this is pretty much definition pack filler. It's a 3 mana 3/4 that says discover a legendary minion. The pool for legendaries is so wide, you're never going to be able to get what you want consistently. So this is just obvious pack filler. I don't think any deck is going to seriously consider running this, but in Arena, this will be disgusting. Next up here, we have a new Murloc, 1 mana 1/1 Crowd Surfer with a Death Rattle. Give any other minion +1/+1 in this Death Rattle. So, this is a really interesting card, but I don't know if it's actually going to see serious play because the buff has the chance to go to your opponent's board, which is really bad for you. Obviously, if you're playing a Murloc deck, you're going to have more minions than your opponent most of the time, but still, it just seems like too high of a risk. You have better options in Wild, and in Standard, I don't know that there's any really good Murloc decks to put this in. Alright, next up here we have Photographer Fizzle, the last of the 3 legendaries that were revealed. And this guy is a 3 mana 3/3 that says Battlecry, take a snapshot of your current hand and shuffle it into your deck. Now, I wasn't able to get an image for the card that he creates, but he does create a card called Snapshot that is a 2 mana spell that adds your hand to your hand. So you draw that eventually, and it only takes up one spot in your hand. You don't draw the cards out of your deck. Just to clarify. So this is essentially Dead Man's Hand, but in a minion. What this does mean is that you can play Reno Dead Man's Hand a lot easier now. You technically already could with ETC by putting a Dead Man's Hand inside of ETC. But that's only been possible for, you know, the less than a week that ETC has been out. But that is a thing currently. This does make it a lot more consistent, though, and I think it actually makes Reno Dead Man's Hand the best version of Dead Man's Hand. I don't know if it makes Dead Man's Hand a good deck, though. We'll have to see. Outside of Dead Man's Hand, I do think it's pretty good value, especially in a Reno deck, to be able to get your Reno cards, duplicates of those, stuff like that. So I do think it's going to see play in those kinds of decks. Alright, next up here we have a new Quillbore, a 3-mana 1/5 called Rowdy Fan. It says, Battle Cry, choose a minion, it has +4 attack while this is alive. Now, this strikes me as another pack filler card. Obviously, if your opponent's dictating trades, they just take this out first, and then the 4 attack goes away. It could be in some sort of aggro deck used to push just 4 damage. I mean, that it does seem pretty good for 3 mana, so I guess that's an angle for it. Now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more, that does seem kind of good. So, yeah, maybe that is the angle for it. But, I think your opponent will take this out first most of the time, unless you're putting it on a taunt minion, so I don't know how useful this is ever going to be on your opponent's turn. Next up here we have Obsessive Fan, a 4-mana 2/6 with Battle Cry. Choose a minion, it has stealth while this is alive. So all of the fan cards have this in common, they all do something while they're alive. This one's kind of useful for certain things, you keep something stealthed hidden behind this, but most really valuable things that you want to hide behind this are pretty expensive, which pushes this to a pretty late game play. I don't think that's going to be very good, and this is already a 4-drop. It's pretty expensive, and it's really not that good of stats for 4 mana. A 2/6 is just pretty underwhelming, especially in today's Hearthstone, so I really just have trouble seeing where this fits in. Next up here we have Outfit Tailor, a 3-mana 2/2 that says Battle Cry, give a friendly minion attack and health equal to this minion's. Now this card to me looks like a really good tempo version of Seafloor Savior because you're getting immediate stats out of it instead of dredging and putting it on the next card you're drawing. Those are really slow stats. This instead is going to give those stats charge usually, and you buff it up with the hand buff the same as Seafloor Savior. It's going to cause some insane moments, I think. Outside of hand buff decks, I don't think it has much hope, but there is another angle for it because Death Knight also has hand buff, so look out for hand buff Death Knight running this card. Next up here is Candle Raiser, a 4-mana 3/3 with Divine Shield that says Finale, give adjacent minions Divine Shield. Now, this is an incredible card for aggro, for token decks. You just give your whole board Divine Shield most of the time on turn 4. You could say, usually, maybe you miss some 1-drops or something, but the point is you give your most important minions Divine Shield. You play a 3/3 with Divine Shield, all for 4 mana. That is pretty broken. Now, obviously, that only works when you are able to pull off the Finale. Otherwise, it's a pretty underwhelming card. A 3-mana, or 4-mana, I mean, a 4-mana 3/3 with Divine Shield is pretty underwhelming in today's Hearthstone, but the Finale probably makes this actually worth it in some aggro decks, especially in a 4 expansion meta. Next up here we have Cowbell Soloist. Now, like all soloists, this requires the board to be empty on your side. So, what this one does is it deals 2 damage. It's a 3-mana 4/2. So, this is pretty good value, honestly. We've seen 3-mana 3/3s that deal 2, and those have had success in the past. We have Amber Whelp right now, which is a 3-mana 3/3 that deals 3. That's a little better than this, but a 3-mana 4/2 is pretty good in some decks. They care more about attack. To be fair, those decks also care about having a board, and this cares about you not having a board, so there's a little bit of a conflict there. But the 2 damage can go face, which makes me think that this could fit into some sort of tempo rogue or something like that. Alright, next up here we have an insane card. 2 mana, 0/3, Stereo Totem. At the end of your turn, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. This is beyond broken. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's just a 0/3. It's not a big threat. Yes, in standard. In wild, this is going to be insane. This is going to be a menace in Even Shaman. Even Shaman is already an overperforming deck, and it's underplayed for how good it is. With this card added to it, it's going to be absolutely disgusting. Alright, next up here we have Static Waveform, a 3-mana 5/6, except not really, because it says at the start of each turn, lose 1 attack or health chosen randomly. So theoretically, you can just have this thing lose health every turn, and it'll just die in 6 turns. Obviously, that would actually be good if that happened, because you're getting to attack face 6 times with 5 attack. But, well, I guess that would be 5 times, because the first time he has Summoning Sickness. But I think the real strength of this card is in a Silence deck, which makes me think this card is not going to be very good, because we already had Arcane Watcher in the past. That card was very similar to this, and had the same stat line, and it just did not perform very well. And we also had Ancient Watcher in the core set, or, well, at the time it wasn't the core set, it was just in the basic set. But we had that. We don't have that anymore, or no wait, it wasn't in basic, right, it was in classic. But the point is, we had Ancient Watcher in addition. I mean, I'm guessing we're going to get more silence minions of some kind if they're trying to push some sort of silence archetype. But we'll have to see, because otherwise this looks pretty bad. Alright, next up here, we have Unpopular Has-Been. It's a 6-mana 5/5 that says Death Rattle, summon a random 5-cost minion from the past. Now this is pretty similar to a lot of minions we've seen in the past. Big 6-mana Death Rattles that are trying to cheat out stats. So my guess is that the line for this is some sort of way to cheat out Death Rattles into play, so you summon these random 5/5s directly from hand, instead of having to have this die on board. We'll have to see how that looks before I can evaluate that, really, because on its own, this looks pretty underwhelming. It's kind of like a piloted Sky Golem, a little bit better than that, but that's a really old card, so you need to be a lot better than that, I think. Alright, our next card here is Worgen Roadie. A 3-mana 3/4 that says Battle Cry, summon a 0/3 instrument case for your opponent, break it for a random weapon. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, this card looks pretty trash. Now, it does summon a 0-attack minion for your opponent, so there is always that angle of filling your opponent's board with junk, but I just don't see that ever really being a viable strategy, and not just like a meme strategy. Now, that said, if it ever were a viable strategy, it would be with a cheaper minion like this, and the ability to shadow step it over and over in Rogue. So maybe you can do something with that. But outside of that, it's a pretty bad minion, because a random weapon is pretty terrible on average, I would say. A lot of weapons aren't really even playable. So it's kind of a rough pool to be randomly selecting from. And you have to put in 3 damage to pop that chest and get your weapon, so I just don't see that being good. Alright, our next card here is Cover Artist, a 4-mana 3/3 with Battle Cry, transform into a 3/3 copy of a minion. Now, this card is basically just a better version of a lot of other cards, Faceless Manipulator chief among them. It's also better than every conditional version of, what's it called, Molten Reflection. Molten Reflection just summons a copy of a minion for 4 mana in Mage. A lot of other spells have been made that are conditional, that do the same thing. This does that, and it does it just as efficiently when all you care about is the minion's effect. Now, when you're trying to cheapen the spells, like with Molten Reflection, obviously this is worse. Or when it has some sort of upside or stat upside that you care about, then obviously this is going to be worse. But for those moments where you just want to copy a minion and get its effect copied and you don't care about the body, this is going to be pretty good. Alright, next up here we have Audio Medic, a 2-mana 2/3 with Rush, and Finale, gain lifesteal. Now this is a pretty basic minion, but it also is kind of useful, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this in some sort of deck. Especially any deck that can buff this, like Hand Buff Paladin, where you can get more lifesteal out of it by buffing it up to be bigger. Now, we don't know what sort of decks there are going to be like that, because a lot of the hand buff stuff is rotating, but there is a chance that this is good in some sort of deck, and I especially wouldn't count it out with such a limited card pool. Next up here we have Rolling Stone, and I gotta say I'm really loving the song puns for these names. They're pretty good. Rolling Stone is a pretty obvious one. Most people are going to get that one. Some of these are a little bit more obscure, but I really like what the team has done here. Flavor-wise, it's just hitting it out of the park. Anyway, Rolling Stone is a 2-mana 2/2 with Rush and Battle Cry. If the last card you played costs 1, gain +1/+1. Now, this card to me looks actually bonkers, because it's a 2-mana 3/3 with Rush, and it's pretty consistently that in the aggro elemental shaman deck, which is still fairly solid. It's not the best aggro deck at the moment, but it is getting some help from this expansion, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it cropping back up in the meta. Next up, we have an 8-mana 3/10 big monster named Mish-Mash Mosher. It has Rush, and after this attacks, gain +1 attack and attack a random enemy minion. And it's also an undead. So this is going to be a board clear a lot of the time. You have to think about it a little bit. It's kind of like Defile in that regard, but only in that regard. So you don't actually even have to kill whatever you're attacking. Notably, it attacks again after it attacks, which means that this is just going to keep attacking after you attack something until it dies. Or you could give this immune. Now, Jailer hasn't been that good so far, but imagine this in a Jailer deck. You just board clear your opponent's entire board and get this huge monster of a minion that's immune. That's incredible, and every time it goes face after that first turn that you board clear, it clears the opponent's board again. This is going to be completely ridiculous with Jailer, and I think it might actually make Jailer meta. What? That would be crazy, wouldn't it? I'd like to see it, honestly, at least for a minute. I'm sure I'd get pretty sick of it pretty quickly, but for the first week or so, it'd be pretty funny. Alright, next up here we have Concert Promo Drake, an 8-mana 8/8 with tradable and Finale, destroy an enemy minion. Now, this is pretty insane and cool to me. Not because of its effect, I think it's a pretty mediocre minion, actually. It does destroy a random minion. Or actually, it's not random, I guess. Now that I'm looking at it again, you get to choose what minion. So it's better than a lot of effects like this, but it is 8 mana, so you expect it to be better. Honestly, I'd expect it to be destroying multiple minions for 8 mana, and that's why it's a little underwhelming to me. But it is tradable, so you have that trade-off of it being able to be traded throughout the game. So it makes a little bit sense that it's weaker. And the coolest thing about this, though, to me, is that it is tradable, which means that tradable is an evergreen keyword. They will be using tradable for future sets, and that is so cool to me because it is such a good keyword. It's been so successful at making the game feel fresher and better for control decks because you aren't stuck with these expensive or esoteric tech cards in your hand. You can throw them back into your deck and get better cards. Next up here, we have a 2-mana 1/2 instrument deck. Battle Cry, draw a weapon. I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking with this one. I don't know why they thought this was okay. Kingsbane is probably coming back to the meta because of this card and another card we're going to get into shortly. But also, this is just insane for any other deck because before the card that drew a weapon was a rogue exclusive card. Now any class has access to this, which means that in Secret Mage you can draw a Luneth every time with 3 cards out of your deck. You have a Luneth and 2 of these. And in Druid you can play these to draw your Twig and Sphere. It's just disgusting. I'm sure I could think of more if I tried to. But the main thing to me is having 4 copies of cards that just draw your weapon for 2 mana in Kingsbane. That seems incredible to me. And part of the reason it seems incredible to me is this card. 1 mana 1/1, Air Guitarist. Battle Cry, give your weapon +1 durability. They did it. They finally did it. The Madmen. They put durability gaining on a cheap Battle Cry. This is actually ridiculous. Being able to add durability to your Kingsbane just means you have to draw it less often. Now, to be honest, that's not that helpful once you've added draw to your Kingsbane with the Silverleaf Poison. But it is going to be really good for when you're not drawing certain cards to be able to just extend the life of your Kingsbane. On top of that, this can just be really useful in a lot of other decks for other weapons. It won't be useful for Druid, obviously, because they want to break their weapon, but for any class that's trying to get extra swings out of their weapon, this could be a really useful inclusion. Alright, our next card here is Party Animal, a 2-mana 2/3 with Battle Cry, give +1/+1 to a minion of each type in your hand. Now, this is actually a very good card. It doesn't look as good as you would think at first glance, but if you can build some sort of menagerie deck, first of all, this is a beast, so it fits right in having a type, and it also gives +1/+1 to each type. Cards before that were like this listed the types that they worked on. This can actually work on anything, which means if you have 5 amalgams in hand, every single one of them gets buffed, in addition to anything else you have with tribes. That's pretty bonkers. Now, obviously, it's not going to work if you, say, have 3 Murlocs and a bunch of amalgams. Only one of the Murlocs gets hit. But it will be insane for menagerie decks. There's also been some menagerie support recently with, like, Mistake, so this is definitely looking like it's a contender for some sort of deck. Next up here we have Freebird, a 4-mana 2/2 with Charge, and Battle Cry gain +1/+1 for each other Freebird you've played this game. One of the first thoughts I had with this is Shadow Step. Shadow Step with this is pretty gross. You get to keep bringing this back and getting more charge damage, but it does take a little while to ramp up, and Rogue typically doesn't like stuff like that. So what I really think would be the upside of this is in Hunter with stuff like Northshire Farmer and Dire Frenzy. Now, I do believe Northshire Farmer is rotating. In fact, I'm certain of it. It's from Stormwind. but Dire Frenzy might be sticking around in Core. I haven't had a chance to look at Core yet, so I do believe they posted what's in Core. I haven't looked yet, though. But if Dire Frenzy is in Core, that is definitely a possibility for Standard. And in Wild, I actually just think this is too slow. So, outside of Standard, I think this is just like a meme. Alright, our last card up here is Amplified Elekk. A huge 10-mana beast. It's a 6/12 with Taunt and Death Rattle, deal 3 damage to all enemy minions. This is a ridiculous card, honestly. I don't know what kind of deck wants it, because it is very expensive, but it does a lot for the 10 mana. It's a 6/12 taunt, that's a lot of stats, you get a lot of attack, and you get a board clear out of it. It's pretty good. And if you're cheating it out, it's even better. Like, this just replaces that 6 mana 3/7 in Priest, in the big Priest deck, as the way to clear your enemy's board. It's just really good for stuff like that. And also, you can play this in Big Beast Hunter and cheat this out. Alright guys, that does it for the detailed reviews. Let's get into star ratings. Tony, King of Piracy, is a 3-star card in Standard and a 5-star card in Wild. Metronome is a 4-star card in Standard and a 3-star card in Wild. Audio Amplifier is a 4-star card in Standard and a 2-star card in Wild. Annoying Fan is a 3-star card in Standard and a 2-star card in Wild. Frequency Oscillator is a 4-star card in Standard and a 5-star card in Wild. Pozzik, Audio Engineer, is a 4-star card in Standard and a 2-star card in Wild. Festival Security is a 3-star card in Standard and a 2-star card in Wild. Merch Seller is a 2-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Paparazzi is a 2-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Crowd Surfer is a 2-star card in both Standard and Wild. Photographer Fizzle is a 4-star card in Standard and a 3-star card in Wild. Rowdy Fan is a 4-star card in Standard and Wild. Obsessive Fan is a 2-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Outfit Tailor is a 3-star card in Standard and a 4-star card in Wild. Handle Raiser is a 5-star card in Standard and a 3-star card in Wild. Cowbell Soloist is a 3-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Stereo Totem is a 3-star card in Standard and a 5-star card in Wild. Static Waveform is a 1-star card in both Standard and Wild. Unpopular Has-Been so far seems like a 2-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Now, I know I said this card was bad, but I actually do think with the limited number of weapons in Standard that it is a 3-star card. In Wild, though, this is a 1-star card. Cover Artist is a 4-star card in Standard and a 3-star card in Wild. Audio Medic is a 3-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Rolling Stone is a 3-star card in Standard and a 4-star card in Wild. Mish-Mash Mosher is actually going to be a 5-star card in Standard because of that Jailer combo I was talking about. In Wild, it's 3 stars. Concert Promo Drake is a 3-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Instrument Tech is a 3-star card in Standard, and if I could, I would give it 6 stars in Wild. Air Guitarist is also 3 stars in Standard and 5 stars in Wild. Party Animal is a 4-star card in Standard and a 3-star card in Wild. Freebird is a 3-star card in Standard and a 1-star card in Wild. Amplified Elekk seems like a good card, but I don't think there are any decks that want to play it in Standard, so in Standard, it's going to be a 2-star card. In Wild, it is a 3-star card because there are ways to cheat it out. I do think it will see play. Well, anyway, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, remember to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all my new content, which I release every week. Also, since you made it to the end of the video, here's my announcement. Once I reach 100 subs on this channel, I'm going to be starting a new series, and I'm going to be putting a series of polls up on my Twitter for you guys to decide what game I play. So if there's something you want to see me play, make sure you subscribe and follow me on Twitter so you can see those polls when they go live. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for today. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Peace.